being late. I just want to say that it's great to be back in Hebron, but I just want to say I'm sorry that we're getting in here later than the appointed hour. Glad you're here.
The guy in the White House shows up late once in a while himself.
Well, we want him out. You know, so I'm Chris Gibson. I think I've met many of you before, but not all. And this is my wife, Mary Jo. We're actually married 14 years ago today. So. So, and we have 3 kids, Katie, Maggie, and Connor. They are 12, 11, and 9. Our 12-year-old is soon to become a 13-year-old, so we have a teenager in the offing here in about 3 days. So, changes in our household. But, you know, normally the way I do this is I talk about, you know, a little bit about my background so you can understand that, and then I talk about the state of the country, and then from there I talk about the platform. But, you know, I thought I'd actually deviate a little bit from my standard way of doing that, and just sort of ask you some questions. And start that way, and then I'd like to then transition into some of these other areas that I think you want to hear. But you know, I just want to thank Dorothy and to Brian for the opportunity to be with you, and for you to take time on a night like this, a beautiful night. By the way, it's absolutely gorgeous driving up here. Just I know you appreciate it, but it's worth a while, you know, every day to just stop and be thankful. Be thankful for the place you live here. You know, to be born American is to win the lottery. You know, to get an opportunity to live here, to live free, you know, and to have such beautiful landscape here. But you know, what I'd like to do is just pulse you and ask you, what's your sense of the campaign right now in terms of what you're hearing on the ground, what you're seeing on TV? I'm just sort of interested in hearing your perspective of the race. Okay.
I think your opposition coming out saying that you're against public education, I mean, it's so distorted. What you're against is the federal government laundering our money. Am I correct?
Yes. Well, I'm going to be very specific in how I feel about it, but I will tell you that in a nutshell is we want to empower teachers, administrators, school boards, parents, and students. That's how we want to empower. There's some federal money that comes. About 4.8% of the federal funding that goes to our school districts comes from the federal government. And that should continue. What we want to see is consolidation of the bureaucrats. And I will tell you that, not widely known, is that the Department of Education was actually created in 1980. How many people did not know that we didn't have a Department of Education in the 1970s? Is that what, you guys knew that? No. Okay, well we did. We had the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. That's what we had in the 1970s. We had we had, you know, a big growth of government. And by the way, not just one party. Okay, the major issues of our time have been, both parties have contributed to them. You know, right now we're in a situation where we have an issue with our economy. We have an issue with the debt, and we have an issue with the war. All 3 of them, both parties had something to do with it. So, but the Department of Education, created in 1980, 480 employees, about a budget of about $12 billion. And today, there are over 4,800 employees and a budget of about $80 billion. Does anybody think our quality is 10 times better than it was in 1980? No. And who knows a teacher? Any teachers answer that? Right here. All right. So let me ask you this. If I had to ask you your 3 biggest frustrations, what are they? What are your 3 biggest frustrations?
Well, lack of budget for me and teaching.
Yes.
Lack of support from parents, and lack of respect for education.
Thank you for sharing that. How about, is there any frustration with unfunded mandates that come down telling you what you're going to do? See, the thing of it is, you think about where did they come from? They came from, in large measure, that comes from your bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. See, this is what our campaign, this is what I want to see less of. I want to see us consolidate that, and I want to see us empower school boards. So, you know, when somebody says I'm not for the direct spending, the direct money to the school districts, that's not true. But what I am for is consolidating the government. We can't afford what we have right now. We just simply can't. We're on the road to bankruptcy, and it's not just, we need to look across the entire federal government in ways that we can do more with less, because for too long, we did less with more. Now I gotta tell you, there are some things that I think our federal government should do that will help education. I think that it's worthwhile for us to collect information and analysis on best practices so that we can share that. I think that that's a proper role for our federal government. And the way we can do that is that, like I said, before the Department of Education, we have the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and if we consolidate, we would be able to gain those insights, but we wouldn't be paying for an ever-increasing number of employees down in Washington, D.C. that don't come free. We have to pay for all, every time we do this, every time we expand the size of the federal government, we end up paying salaries, benefits, and pension obligations, and then we have to build a new building or acquire a building, and we have to pay the operations and maintenance. So, to the extent that we can have more efficiencies, and we can consolidate across the federal government, we'll have more money available here. Because also think about this, for every tax dollar that we send to Washington, D.C., you know it doesn't come back whole. It doesn't, because we got to pay the beast, first of all. We got to pay for that bureaucracy down there. So there has to be a portion of that that pays expenditures, and pays for expenditures broadly defined, including those salaries, those all that personnel cost, and all the associated actions coming from the federal government. And then, because of the way that monies are often allotted, we don't actually fare as well on many issues, not all, but as many issues when it comes to the other states. So when we send a dollar down there, we don't get it back whole. So what's better for us in general is to try to empower local communities, and I also believe that there's a very proper role for the State Department of Education. And I'll tell you what, my experiences, you may know, in the Army for many years, I mean, and you have an executing agency or entity, and then you need supervision. In our Constitution, there's checks and balances, right? We believe we were concerned about the accumulation of tyrannical power. Our founders had read history, and they wanted auxiliary checks to prevent that. So, I mean, part of this is related to even how we do business. We need to have supervision for the boards, for the school boards. So to me, it makes complete sense why we have a state board of education. We got to have it. I know that probably some may disagree. I think we have to have it because we need to have a means of providing oversight to the school boards, who are the executing agent, along with the administrators, the teachers, parents, and students of our daily quest for excellence in education. So what this discussion is about is what's the appropriate role? What's the appropriate role for the federal government? What's the appropriate role for the state government? And what's the appropriate role at the local level? And I think you can appreciate that the stress that we're under right now has a lot to do with the economy heading south. Because when the economy heads south, first of all, there's more misery for us, for all of us. Second of all, there's less revenues coming in. When we're not expanding, we're not growing, that means that we're not paying as much in terms of taxes. And what that means is that governments at all levels, governments at the federal level, government at the state level, government at the local level, are now under acute stress. Because you don't have as much resources to deal with the same challenges you had the day before that the economy started heading south. So when I see an inextricable link between the economy, between jobs, the economy, the deficit, and even education, I want you to understand that that is why our campaign stands for method to grow the economy, for removing impediments to growth, because I see it not only helping us in terms of creating wealth and helping you flourish and reach your God-given potential, but it also helps in terms of education. Yeah.
Chris, I would think it would be a good idea, what you just told us about 1970s and education. I don't think people know that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
if you could link the number of people that they got on the payroll to the quality of education back in the 70s against what is the quality now, I don't know what it is. I think you're missing the boat by not letting the people know that there's no.
yeah. Oh, you're right. And I'll tell you that we did a press release on it. You know, 30-second ads. how much can you really do in a 30-second ad? And you're very vulnerable. When you're in a position like, yeah, look, we're not going to be able to raise as much money as my opponent. He's got tons of money, you know, and he can do this. He can throw up all these ads, and you know, I've been under stress in my life, and
I think
okay.
that's a big item he's got against you,
Yeah.
that people are going to out of it.
Yeah.
It might be worth a 30-second ad to explain it.
Yeah. Well, you know, in the debate, I'm going to have an opportunity to explain these views, and you know, surely we're going to compete. You know, we'll compete in the air. Thank you for that feedback, though. That sort of prompted all that, and let's keep that going.